A former Marine, hailed for his integrity and discipline, walked out of his Massachusetts apartment one winter morning and never came back. Months later, his body was discovered in a patch of remote woods, shot execution style, still dressed in the clothes he was last seen in. David Cox's name was never meant to be famous, but his role in a notorious hazing incident at Guantanamo Bay would go on to inspire a Hollywood blockbuster. And then, years after clearing his name and moving on with life, he ended up dead, murdered with precision, his wallet untouched, his truck abandoned, and no signs of a struggle. Who would kill a man like David? A man who refused to plead guilty when offered a way out, who finished his military service honorably, who stood up against corruption even when it cost him. 3 decades have passed since David was found in those woods. No arrests, no known suspects, no clear answers. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we retrace David Cox's path, from Gitmo and courtroom drama to an unfinished lawsuit and a phone call he never picked up, and examine the most prominent theories before breaking down what most likely happened. Timeline of David Cox's case. David Vernon Cox grew up in Needham, Massachusetts. Straight out of high school, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps, a path driven by purpose, not pressure. By 1986, at just 19 years old, David was stationed at the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. He was part of an elite unit nicknamed the 10. Tensions on the base were high. Marines were allegedly ordered to provoke Cuban guards by firing across the fence line, part of an unofficial and deeply troubling initiation ritual. When PFC William Alvarado reported these illegal orders to a congressman, the backlash was swift and calculated. According to David, their platoon commander hinted that Alvarado needed to be taught a lesson. The message was chillingly clear. If he were to fall down the stairs in the middle of the night, oh well. Late one night in July 1986, a so-called Code Red was carried out. David and several Marines entered Alvarado's barracks. Christopher Valdez, then a squad leader, later testified, "Saturday night we went into Alvarado's room. We blindfolded him and gagged him. Dave, Cox, started shaving his head, and within 5 minutes he had stopped struggling. The hazing went too far. Alvarado choked on the gag and lost consciousness. David reportedly recognized the danger and ordered the attack stopped. Alvarado survived, but the consequences were immediate. 10 Marines, including David, were arrested. Some faced attempted murder charges. David, who had not inflicted the worst harm, was offered an administrative discharge in exchange for a guilty plea. He refused. His lawyer, Don Marcari, later reflected, "We had the additional burden of now saying he was following an implied order, and it was a very difficult case to win." Macari warned David that obedience to orders hadn't worked at Nuremberg or My Lai. The base colonel denied giving any such directive, but David stood firm. He felt in his heart he'd done nothing wrong. In the 1987 court-martial, David was acquitted of the most serious charges. He was found guilty of simple assault and sentenced to time served. Most of the others involved accepted plea deals. David didn't just avoid disgrace. He stayed in the Marines and was honorably discharged as a corporal in 1989. Life after Gitmo. Back in Massachusetts, David sought a fresh start. He took on blue-collar jobs, landscaping, trash collection, and kept his circle small. But in 1992, his past caught up with him in a surprising way. A Few Good Men, a major motion picture, hit theaters with a story that closely mirrored David's experience in Cuba. The screenplay, written by Aaron Sorkin, was based on the same incident. Sorkin's sister, a Navy JAG lawyer, had defended one of the Marines. David was stunned. The film included no mention of the real men involved and claimed any resemblance was coincidental. But the details were unmistakable. In the movie, the hazed Marine dies and the perpetrators are discharged in disgrace. In real life, Alvarado lived, and David believed they had saved his life. Here was this movie company making tons of money off his story, and if it weren't for him, the story never would have existed, said his girlfriend, Elaine Tinsley. David began speaking out. He appeared on radio, gave newspaper interviews, and criticized the film for portraying the Marines as murderers. Alongside other members of the Ten, he sought legal recourse. A lawsuit against Castle Rock Entertainment was prepared, claiming invasion of privacy and exploitation. David also planned a book with attorney Maclaren, hoping to tell the full, unfiltered truth. January 1994, a turning point. David and Elaine were now living together in Natick, Massachusetts. Elaine was a student at Wellesley College. David had just taken a temporary job at a UPS shipping terminal in Somerville and hoped to be hired full-time. He told his brother Steve Cox that he'd witnessed something suspicious at work involving a supervisor and a driver, potential theft. He said he came upon a supervisor and a driver involved in some type of activity, what he believed was theft, Steve later recalled. David was keen on moving into UPS's loss prevention division and saw this as both a red flag and an opportunity. On January 4, 1994, David met Steve for drinks and to watch a basketball game. Steve noted his brother seemed off, not himself. David admitted to having some issues with Elaine, but didn't elaborate. That was the last time Steve saw David. The disappearance. The next morning, January 5th, was cold and snowy. Elaine left for work around 8:30 a.m. David stayed behind, resting a sore back on the couch. He wore jeans and a black Marine Sniper school hoodie. Nothing fancy. At 11:30 a.m., a UPS supervisor called to offer David a full-time job. He didn't answer. The message went to voicemail. Another call came shortly after, also unanswered. Elaine phoned home around noon, expecting David to be thrilled by the news. No answer. By 5:30 a.m., when she returned home, David was gone. The scene was unsettling. When I came into the house, I realized right away that the doors to all the rooms were open, and our rabbit was hopping all over the place. David's truck was still outside. The keys were in the ignition. Inside, his uncashed paycheck lay on the dashboard. His 9mm handgun remained in the glove compartment. His wallet, later found inside, had cash and cards untouched. Elaine called friends and family. No one had seen him. The next day, she filed a missing person report, but police initially assumed David had left voluntarily. No search was launched. No neighbors were questioned. His mother, June Cox, didn't buy it. I had a feeling of dread. I knew something was wrong. Weeks passed. David's bank accounts remained inactive. No sightings, no tips. He had vanished without a trace. April 2nd, 1994. The discovery. Almost 3 months later, a man canoeing down the Charles River near Medfield saw a sneaker sticking out from a pile of brush. Beneath snow and branches lay a body. David Cox. He was still wearing his jeans, black hoodie, and notably his old Marine camouflage jacket, a jacket he hadn't worn in years. The body was found deep in the woods, more than half a mile from the nearest road, nestled between 2 shooting ranges. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious wounds beyond the gunshots. David had been shot 4 times, once at the base of the neck, 3 more times in the left side of his torso. It was a close-range execution. Police recovered 3 9mm shell casings. Nothing had been stolen, no robbery, no carjacking, just a clean, deliberate killing in a remote area where gunfire wouldn't raise alarms. Rick Nagel, a state police investigator, observed, Only someone who really knows the area could have found the murder site. David's brother Steve put it plainly. This was a highly planned and orchestrated murder. Aftermath. With the lawsuit against Castle Rock quietly settled and the crime scene scrubbed of leads, the trail went cold. Over the years, family members, journalists, amateur sleuths, and law enforcement have all wrestled with the same question. Why was David Cox killed? His mother never stopped asking. His sister still pushes for answers. And more than 30 years later, investigators still hope that someone somewhere knows the truth. The death of David Cox was not a crime of passion, not a robbery gone wrong, not random. It was methodical, calculated, cold. That much everyone agrees on. But why he was targeted and who wanted him dead has remained a source of bitter debate ever since. Theory number 1. Military retribution. The Code Red revenge. From the beginning, many suspected that David's murder traced back to his time in the Marine Corps, specifically the hazing scandal at Guantanamo Bay that would later inspire a few good men. Don McCary, David's attorney during the court-martial, was among the first to raise the alarm. I always believed it was somehow related to the military. It had that feel. There were details that felt off. David was killed execution style. He was wearing a Marine camo jacket he hadn't worn in years. The location? A wooded area between two gun clubs, perfect for masking gunfire. It just had military written all over it, said Steve Cox, David's older brother. My feeling is it was retribution. Maybe someone whose career was ruined because of what happened in Cuba. The theory goes like this. David's vocal media appearances in the early 1990s, where he criticized Marine leadership and openly discussed the Guantanamo incident, may have reopened old wounds. Perhaps someone with rank, an officer or former Marine, wanted revenge for the embarrassment the case caused. David's own mother, June Cox, shared that she warned him after hearing one of his radio interviews. I said, "I don't like what you're doing. I think it's dangerous." He didn't take it seriously, but she feared he was stirring up something best left buried. Some have pointed to the symbolic nature of the Marine jacket, as if David was being sent a message in death. Others go further and suggest the murder had the precision and planning of a military operation. It was the work of a well-trained mind, Steve has said, like that of a military officer. Still, not all in the family agree. Christine Cox, David's sister, has cast doubt. To suggest this was military, I think, was trying to throw us off track. Even law enforcement, after years of investigation, has admitted there is no evidence supporting any link between the Code Red incident or the Hollywood film and David's murder. Yet the idea persists. Theory 1A, the Hollywood hit. The wilder offshoot of the military theory gained traction online after David and other Marines began preparing a lawsuit against Castle Rock Entertainment, the company behind A Few Good Men. The lawsuit, which claimed the film profited from their real-life experiences without credit, was quietly settled after David's death. The timing raised eyebrows. David was taken out, like Kennedy and Monroe, one commenter claimed on the Unsolved Mysteries message board, alleging that Hollywood figures may have hired someone to eliminate a legal threat. Some imagined a scenario where powerful people wanted to prevent bad publicity or protect high-profile actors. One Reddit user wrote, "I don't buy either theory, especially that it was someone involved with the film. It was made by Paramount. They could handle lawsuits. It was something close to home." Even David's family seems skeptical. Christine Cox believes the murder was staged to look military on purpose. The camouflage jacket, the place he was found, it was all to mislead us. While this theory makes for a gripping plotline, there is no known evidence linking anyone in the film industry to David's death. Theory 2. The UPS inside job. In contrast to revenge plots, this theory is rooted in something far more mundane and potentially more dangerous: workplace theft. Just days before he disappeared, David told his brother Steve that he had witnessed suspicious activity at the UPS terminal in Somerville. He came upon a supervisor and a driver involved in what he believed was theft, Steve said. David was eager to work full-time in loss prevention. If he'd blown the whistle, he could have exposed a potentially lucrative scheme. That would have made him a threat. On the day he vanished, David was expecting a call about a full-time position. That call came and went to voicemail. By the time Elaine got home, he was gone. The theory proposes that someone from UPS, possibly the same individuals David had concerns about, came to the apartment under friendly pretenses and lured him out. The secluded spot where David was killed was quiet enough for a gunshot to go unnoticed, yet remote enough to hide a body for months. If you assume it was someone from UPS, someone local, the rest falls into place, one web sleuths user wrote. Police did investigate the workplace angle. However, they publicly stated, "We do not believe anyone at UPS was involved in this case." Still, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The scenario doesn't require conspiracies, just one or two people protecting themselves from exposure. It remains, for many, a theory that feels grounded in reality. Theory 3. A personal betrayal. Someone he trusted. Investigators often remind us, in most murders, the victim knows the killer, and in David's case, nothing in the crime scene suggested a break-in or forced entry. David's truck was still parked. His pistol was left behind. There were drinking glasses on the floor, as if a conversation had turned physical, but not violently so. His beloved rabbit had been set loose. That rabbit never got out. David was meticulous about closing doors, said Elaine. The theory here is simple. Someone David knew and trusted came by that morning. They talked, they left together. David, wearing sneakers and expecting a short trip, followed them willingly into the woods. Even law enforcement seems to lean this way. In a 2019 update, investigators said, David wore that field jacket and his sniper hoodie for a reason that day. David knew who he was going with. He trusted that person. Could it have been a friend, a former Marine, someone from UPS, a local acquaintance with a grudge? Some have speculated about Elaine Tinsley, pointing out she waited until the next day to report David missing. Others note that she remotely checked their answering machine, unusual for 1994. But police never considered her a suspect, and David's family has consistently defended her. Elaine also had a verifiable work alibi and was actively calling friends and family the night he went missing. Others have floated alternative possibilities: an ex-lover, a gambling associate, someone with a personal grievance. David did occasionally gamble. At the time of his death, he owed about $1,100 to a local bookie. But with over $3,000 in his account, it seems unlikely this debt led to murder. It just doesn't make sense. He had the money to pay, said Steve. Theory 4. The unknown conspiracy. Finally, there's the catch-all theory, that David was killed for a reason that still isn't public. Maybe he witnessed something while in the military that no one else was supposed to see. Maybe he stumbled into a criminal ring at UPS or elsewhere, something larger than a few missing boxes. Some suggest he had enemies we'll never know about. Others imagine a serial killer or a predatory drifter. But police have ruled out a random attack. There was no sign of robbery, no sign of struggle, no sign of coincidence. This was not random, said State Police investigator Rick Nagel. It was targeted, personal, planned. The unknown conspiracy theory serves as a placeholder, for whatever explanation hasn't yet come to light. After decades of speculation, 2 facts in the case of David Cox stand out. This was a planned killing, and David likely trusted the person who took him to his death. The most plausible explanation combines elements from 2 of the theories we've seen: that David had discovered wrongdoing at UPS, and that the killer was someone in his circle, likely a co-worker or acquaintance, who feared what David might do with that information. As mentioned earlier, David had recently told his brother that he'd witnessed suspicious behavior at the UPS warehouse. He suspected theft, and he was eyeing a full-time role in loss prevention, a job that would have given him authority to investigate it. If someone involved thought he was going to report them, they had motive to stop him. On the morning of January 5th, David was home alone, resting a sore back. Elaine had left for work. The call from UPS offering him the job came at 11:30 a.m., but he didn't answer. That's the moment everything likely changed. The most consistent scenario is this: someone he knew, possibly from UPS, came by the apartment late that morning. No sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle. They talked, maybe had a drink. 2 glasses were found knocked over on the floor. Then the person suggested going for a short drive or checking something out nearby. Something casual, nothing threatening. David left his truck behind, keys still in the ignition, and went with them. He wasn't armed. He wasn't dressed for a long walk. Just jeans and sneakers. But notably, he wore his old marine camouflage jacket, something he hadn't touched in years. As mentioned earlier, investigators believe that detail was significant. It may have been suggested by the person with him. It's freezing, throw that on. Or simply an unconscious choice. But it adds to the impression that David left in a hurry, with no expectation of danger. They drove to a secluded wooded area between 2 gun clubs in Medfield, far from the road, and known only to locals or those familiar with the terrain. As we've seen, the location was ideal, isolated and surrounded by gunfire, so shots wouldn't raise suspicion. David followed them into the woods. He didn't hesitate. He trusted them. Then, somewhere deep in the trees, he turned his back. A single shot to the base of his neck dropped him instantly. 3 more to the side of his torso ensured he wouldn't survive. His killer dragged the body a few feet off the trail and covered it with pine branches, not to make a statement, just to hide it. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was quiet, personal, and efficient. No wallet taken, no valuables touched. The weapon, a 9mm, was standard. The concealment wasn't theatrical. It was panic control. The military and Hollywood theories, while compelling, require too many leaps. A vengeful officer tracking David down across decades. A studio ordering a contract killing over a lawsuit they quietly settled anyway. But this requires only one thing: that someone in David's immediate world had something to hide and feared he would expose it. The person who killed David didn't come from a distant base or a California boardroom. They likely lived nearby, knew his habits, knew his schedule, knew he was alone that morning, waiting on a phone call. The case remains unsolved, but the logic is hard to ignore. Whoever did this wasn't powerful. They were close. Someone David opened the door for. Someone he trusted enough to follow. Someone who left nothing behind but 3 spent shell casings and a silence that's lasted nearly 30 years. If you know anything about the murder of David Vernon Cox, contact the Massachusetts State Police or the Norfolk County DA's tip line. The people who loved him are still waiting.